Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Farrell Allman. It's an interesting day because on this day the show goes to other markets across the state of Mississippi. And while we were talking about Gulfport municipal elections, the real nut of the conversation was the work that volunteers have to do across the state of Mississippi to ensure that we have good, well-controlled, legal voting, where the work that the volunteers do in the trenches to make voting work. It's a great story to tell. So if you have any interest at all in being involved in the democratic process, I really encourage you to look up your local elected officials and find a way to be involved in the process. We can't have enough volunteers. Like Gulfport alone, over 75 people are needed to make that work. So good stuff. Speaking of politics, especially the legislature, I'm thrilled now to move over to my friend Senator Brice Wiggins from coastal Mississippi, District 52. He's a good friend, someone I enjoy checking in with, and we should have already touched base with each other, Brice. But first of all, let me just say, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good, Ricky. Thank you. Appreciate that introduction, and it is always great to be back with you. You do such a great job promoting the coast, but also statewide issues. So thank you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. It's been you've got some important leadership roles in the Senate. It's been moving along. You and I were reflecting before the show started. It's been moving along fast and furiously, as we have been really, really focused on getting the process moving. It's a 90-day session. Last year, it seemed like it went on for about 9 months, and it was a slow process. But man, we got to impasses and points of negotiation really rapidly this year, didn't we?
Yeah, but actually, I think it's normal. But it's nice to be back here, like you said. Last year was a 120-day session. I think, as I was kidding with you earlier, if you allow a bunch of legislators to sit around with, not much on their agendas to do other than just kind of go to inauguration balls and stuff, crazy things can happen. And, the natives get restless, as they say. So we are on the 90-day track, which I think is great because it all keeps us, in my opinion, focused and you get stuff done. So yes, we're here faster than we kind of expected, but that's what we do.
But you know what's interesting? You can go, I guess maybe you have themes of legislative sessions. Certainly one of the themes of this session is the income tax debate and discussion. But we're not alone in having just that. I mean, there's a lot of legislation happening right now. I mean, this is going to be if we can get stuff done and find compromise, this is going to be a productive session, isn't it?
Oh, Ricky, I'm so glad you brought that up. And yes, every session kind of has a theme. And I'm saying because, look, I know I've seen your posts about, let's call it the legacy media. It's amazing what they want to cover. And it's only, like in this instance, tax cuts. Well, let's be honest. There are a whole bunch of other stuff going on, and that all not just the chairman, but the legislators are working on that involves courts, it involves agriculture, it involves seafood, it involves all that you know what? They don't talk about. To them, it's either tax cuts or the palace intrigue that's going on. And to your point, yes, every session that I've been in has been, you have that. Some are more successful than others, depending upon your actual definition. But I've gone back, generally speaking, every year. You go back and look, we did this, we did this, we did this. So if you're detecting a little bit of maybe sarcasm, it's because your point is on. It's like there's so much more going on than just what the theme has been. And you get a little I get a little frustrated because the stuff that, like, take my committee, we're redoing the courts for our children, the youth courts, which, by the way, are a third branch of the government. They have done some media on that. I get that you can't cover everything, but it just goes to your point that there's other stuff going on.
Well, Brice, and you and I have talked about this before, but it's probably worthy of bringing back up again. I think the average person, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or where you are on the political spectrum, you would be surprised how much bipartisan legislation happens, how much working across the aisle is happening. People want to project sort of the polarizing national scene onto Mississippi, and they do it. They do it in where there may be severe debates around things like the income tax. But as a general rule, Mississippi is not like that. I was disappointed in the governor recently for taking a swing at our friend Jeremy England. Because what Jeremy's doing to try to create a very safe approach to in-person early voting, which seems like a very rational thing to do, the way the governor handled it was so polarizing. It made it look like we can't reach across the aisle and work with our cohorts in the other party, but that's just not the way it is in the Mississippi legislature, is it?
No, it's not, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But let me say, you're exactly right. We are not DC, and I do think that the media, and yes, I'm putting a big carpet over everybody, wants to portray it that way. And let's be honest, via social media, that's what people look at, and that takes me to counter some of that. That's why I filed this session and it's passed the Senate a civics bill to teach civics. But let me get back to the other point, is that, yes, the governor, that was not good. I don't know where that came from. I don't know who advised him of that. And that's why the point that you're making is why I think in Jackson, in the Capitol, there was just kind of disappointment that actually happened amongst my colleagues, because Governor Reeves he was lieutenant governor. I served under. He's governor. He knows how it is, and I think that that was, most people I talked to, in fact, pretty much everybody I talked to, said that was unnecessary, went too far. You can have policy debates. You can have those debates, but you don't have to get personal. You don't have to do that. And I think that was the case. And then to your point, kind of some of the stuff that was mentioned about the Democrats. Look, I'll go back to this. Mississippi, the best vote or the most historic vote to this point that I've ever taken was to change the flag. And what I saw, this stuff that we do here, like you said, 80% of it is bipartisan, or if it's not bipartisan, we have professional debate on it. And so I don't think what he did at that point was what you would consider Mississippi values. And I tend to fight back against the DC mentality coming to Mississippi, because after all, we are the hospitality state. So,
hey, listen, I'm not gonna even mention his name because I don't want to give him any credit, but a recent statewide race where a man who did not get elected, thank goodness, suggested that if you reach across the aisle in any way to deal with your Democratic brothers, that you're somehow a bad guy. And, that's just not, I love that way you said it's not the Mississippi way. We're going to disagree on policy. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of love between legislators, and they don't care if you're white or black or Democrat or Republican. And I know this for a fact. This is what plays out every day in the state legislature. I watched it, by the way, at Paul Gallo's memorial when Robert Johnson and Steve Holland spoke there, and the way they spoke, I wish we could have captured that in a can and shared it with everybody, to say people that can disagree so dramatically on certain policies can still have such love and respect for one another. To me, that is a statement about who we are.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And we can't let the DC mentality infiltrate Mississippi. And one of the votes that was recently handled, it passed. I'm going off numbers here. It passed in the Senate like 35-15, and in that 35 vote were Democrats, all the Democrats and Republicans. Now, when there's people that want to say the person you're talking about, because I know it, because I had I had run-ins with him. they would say, "Ooh, you're not conservative or whatever." I said, "No, I'm a Mississippian." Okay. And Mississippi's by nature are conservative, but the policies that we're doing are about to advance Mississippians. And it just, I appreciate you saying it, because we have to keep reminded of it. And I think that's why, going back to what Governor Reeves did with Senator England, I think it kind of didn't ring true from that sense. And people were like, where's this coming from? And early voting, that was the bill, which I voted for and have supported it since it came out in the past. It's, people want it, that I've heard from. So it's a DC mentality, and we don't need that.
One of the biggest statements about that, when Joel Carter got in front of the Senate chamber and said what he said about it, the sustained applause afterwards was a real statement that we don't want to go there as a state. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation, find out the latest on the tax situation with Brice Wiggins. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with my friend Senator Brice Wiggins from down here on the coast. He's Jackson County area, District 52, been in the legislature for some time, and also he's a significant leader in the legislature. And we were chatting during the break that the conversation we just had wasn't about specific legislation or wasn't about policy, but was really about the culture of Mississippi and what Mississippians expect of their legislators. And too often we don't see that. We see the fights and the polarization around those fights and debates, but we don't actually see what happens when the lights go out and they get to spend time together and enjoy being together. We don't see the massive amount of success they have in bipartisan legislation, which is the majority of legislation that comes through Mississippi. So it's good to have that conversation, and I think listeners probably get as much from that as they do from the policy conversations.
And just as an example of that, on the policy example, because I was just reading something today that actually the governor put out, but the quote, Mississippi Miracle in Education, that is completely bipartisan. Like, yes. If you followed it and the data and the numbers are continuing to come in, that is bipartisan education legislation that had debates, respectful debates 10 years ago, continues on. And now, in a lot of ways, we're the envy of the country because of the success and where we've come from to where we've gone on that. That's an example.
So, Brice, we've had conversations with others about kind of where we are right now. You've got a House bill around the income tax situation, which is that's just all-encompassing with eventual complete elimination, and a different, some would say more realistic, but it depends on where you're sitting, view coming from the Senate that it's not trying to kill all birds with one stone, but get the tax rate down over time as well. So where do you think are we at a literal impasse where nothing will happen, or do you think we will come to some resolution?
Ricky, despite maybe some comments I make from time to time, I'm actually an optimist. And so the optimist in me, and I will say, having been around this building for certainly over a decade now, I'm optimistic that we're going to get something. And why do I say that? Well, the big reason is because you have a House plan and you have a Senate plan, and both chambers are talking tax cuts. Okay. When you got that generally speaking is a recipe to get something to the governor. Okay. And these are big issues. But 2/3 of all the bills have died. Okay. And now we're focused on the things that have the most chance of passing. If to put another way, the Senate could have said, nah, we're not going to do anything. And, the House, and we won't even take up the House bill and all that. But what we've done is we've said, hey, this is how we see it. By the way, this kind of thing's going on right now in D.C. in Congress. From what I understand, the House passed their budget bill. The Senate had a budget bill, but it's not like that. The House had to do that. This is what happens, but they'll probably get a budget. This is what happens on tax cuts. So I know that certain ones have made an issue of the different things, particularly full elimination. But as I said when I was on LOX this past weekend, if the legislature sends a tax cut bill that cuts the income tax, that reduces the tax on groceries immediately, I would be shocked if Governor Reeves didn't sign it. I mean, because then he's going down as vetoing a tax cut. I don't know any Republican who wants that behind their name, to be quite honest with you. Does that make sense?
Oh, it does. You know, one of the things I mentioned on the show the other day, that the killer sort of thing in all of this is how the governor and certain others have really kind of put a stake in the dirt that they need to be able to say full elimination for economic development reasons, whatever those perceptions are, et cetera, and that anything short of full elimination is a failure. You don't see it that way, do you?
Well, no, because first of all, you're getting tax cuts to the American people, and if I assume the House will go along with the grocery tax that we talked about, citizens will be getting a tax elimination or tax reduction on groceries, which hasn't happened. That's a win. Okay. And then we have, you've heard it come out of Lieutenant Governor Hosemann. I've said it on my own. We have phased out the income tax over time over the last number of years. We have a surplus. We have the best budget situation we've ever had. You can cut taxes and still pay your bills and run state government at the same time. Let's just say if you cut it all off at one time, like Kansas did back a number of years ago, then you find yourself in a position where you're having to raise taxes again, and that's not what we want to do. So the historical record supports what the Senate has done.
And it helps to have a tax lawyer as your lieutenant governor who really knows the numbers. I mentioned the other day we got to go, but in Louisiana they cut taxes when Jindal was in. But when he left office, we were nearly $1 billion in debt, and they had to dig out of a big hole. So, man, if your projections aren't right about some of this stuff, it could be a major problem for Mississippi. Hey, Brice, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet. Listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.